Welcome back. So this is going to be hopefully a fairly short video just covering the very basic rules for phase 3. And phase 3 of the HCG protocol is when you're stabilizing your new weight. You're attempting to get it set in stone. And if you want more information as I'm talking, you might have different questions come up in your mind where you really want more details. I have all of my current detailed videos and blog posts about phase 3. I have a bunch of them now. You can find them all in one place, and you can just go to hcgchica.com/phase3. Okay, that's it. Just hcgchica.com/phase3, and you'll see all of my posts. I have all kinds of stuff to help with troubleshooting in phase 3, times when the original rules just really won't apply to you, just different things like that, okay? But let's get started with the very basics. So there's four basic rules for phase 3. The first rule is no starches or sugars for 3 weeks following phase 2. So essentially a low-carb diet. Rule number 2, keep your weight within 2 pounds of your LDW. And your LDW is the weight that you are the morning of your last dose of HCG, okay? The morning of your last dose of HCG, that's the weight you're attempting to stay within 2 pounds of, okay? Rule number 3 is if your weight goes above 2 pounds, you do a steak day, which involves fasting all day, drinking lots of water, and then having a large steak and an apple or tomato for dinner. So that's a steak day, and usually your weight comes back down. And then the rule number four is if your weight does go above that 2 pound window and you do a steak day, usually you want to start phase 3 over. And what I mean is you want to have 3 full weeks where you really are having a fairly stable weight before you attempt to incorporate higher carb items again, okay? And we'll talk about that in a second. Now, not too many people are aware of this idea, but it really does make sense because, if your weight's fluctuating a lot, and you do a bunch of steak days, you haven't really spent, and then you get to the end of the 3 weeks, and you start incorporating carbs again. If your body hasn't really been stable at any general weight for any length of time, really, it may be more challenging to try to incorporate carbs then again already. So that's why I'm mentioning it, that it's a good idea to continue phase 3 longer in that case, so that your weight actually becomes stable. Okay, does that make sense? Okay, so those are the 4 rules. Once again, rule 1, no starches or sugars for 3 weeks. Rule 2, keep your weight within 2 pounds of your LDW. 3, if your weight goes above the 2 pounds, do a steak day. And 4, if your weight goes over that 2 pound window and you have to do a steak day, start phase 3, from the start, just do it longer, okay? So those are the 4 basic rules. Like I said, I have way more detail on all of this in other posts, which I'll link you to in this article that goes with the video or podcast, whatever you're listening to. But now I just want to talk real quick about 4 additional phase 3 tips, just to kind of help you out and give you a little more groundwork to start with in case you don't have time to listen to anything else right now. So tip number 1 is if you want to be extra cautious. So you don't have to do these things that I'm going to mention, but if you are having trouble stabilizing your weight with the basic set of rules, there's 3 additional things that really has been shown to help people, okay? The first one is to eat to hunger. So basically, eating to feel satisfied but not getting overly full. Sometimes that can be hard. Before I did the protocol, I was in a habit of overeating. And I was kind of used to that overly full feeling. It actually almost felt comfortable to me. So that's something that if you can learn to eat to hunger and be satisfied but not be overly full, that can really help with stabilization. The second factor that can help is to introduce calories and amounts of food gradually. So I'm going to be honest, the original protocol did state to kind of go from the 500 calories straight to kind of eating a higher calorie diet again. But in practice, from what I've seen, the majority of people who stabilize their weight in phase 3 most easily and are successful are those who actually gradually introduce the calories, and food more gradually over a period of days. And usually what you'll find is when you get off HCG, you're usually not hungry for maybe as much food as you would have been eating before you started the diet. So your body's been kind of, it's not that your stomach shrinks, of course, but your body has kind of adjusted to eating less food. So usually the first few days of P3, you don't need to go right back to eating the same calorie amount that you would have before the diet, you know. Plus, if you weigh less, you are going to be eating lower calorie just in general. So when I started the diet, I was 172 pounds. Now I'm about 126 pounds. My daily calorie intake that I should take to maintain my weight, it's different at those two weights. When you weigh more, you can eat more to maintain that level of weight. I hope that makes sense. So if you've lost a significant amount of weight, your overall amount of food you're going to be eating in general will be lower. You don't have to panic. It's not going to be drastically low at all. I eat heartily. I don't count calories. So I don't want to scare you with that. But just the people who I've seen do well in P3 are those who gradually introduce the calories just over a period of days, you know. So, and I'm already starting to talk too much on this video. Okay, so the third factor that can really help people to stabilize if they're having trouble is introduce dairy, nuts, and fats more slowly, or even wait till phase 4 to add one or more of those food groups. And the reason being is that with the nuts and the dairy anyway, they tend to be common food sensitivities that people don't realize that they had. So if you're, again, this is just if you're having trouble or if you want to be extra cautious. You can leave adding dairy and nuts in till like the end of P3 or till P4. And with fats, you know, you don't have to necessarily wait till the end, but maybe just gradually introduce fats. You know, don't have half a stick of butter, you know, your first day of P3. So I'm just telling you, I'm giving you feedback from what I have seen to be successful for people. So that was tip number 1. If you want to be extra cautious, those 3 things that can really help you stabilize, okay? Tip number 2 is get more detailed info. So I kind of already mentioned this, but I have a ton more detailed guidance on hcgchica.com/phase 3, right? Like I already said, to help you get through this phase. And you know, the reason I'm mentioning it as a fairly important thing is because this phase is just not as reliable as phase 2. It's like, you know, with phase 2, you're pretty much guaranteed if you follow the specific rules of the diet, there's only this small list of foods, you can only eat it this certain way, and if you follow that, you'll lose weight, right? When it comes to phase 3, the rules are a lot more vague. It's like, no starches, no sugars. Like, well, what foods are those and which foods aren't those, you know? So I have more information to help you guys out with that. And there's also a bunch of special case scenarios which will have a bearing on how you stabilize. And it's an important thing for you guys to know about so that you can make this successful. So special case scenarios means that sometimes these rules will need to apply to you differently. Sometimes you actually have to choose not to stabilize within the 2-pound window. There's very logical reasons for this at times, but if you don't research it and look into it, you won't know that, and you might think that you're failing when in actuality it's just your special case scenario. So I hope that helps a little bit. I just don't have time to talk all about that in this video. Tip number 3 is remember the point of P3, okay? Remember the point of phase 3. So, you know, regardless of what weight you end up becoming stable at, whether it's within the 2-pound window, whether it's above the 2-pound window, or maybe even under the 2-pound window, just remember that the point is the same. Become stable at a new, lower weight from where you started. That's really the point of phase 3. You're trying to get your weight set in stone and stable. And it really does do that if you follow this correctly. It becomes stable so that in day-to-day life you might eat a variety, you know, of foods and varied calories from day to day, and your weight will stay relatively the same. That's the idea behind this, okay? So just remember that that's the point of P3. And tip number 4 is eat real food. Eat real food. You know, it's possible that before you started the diet, just like me, you might have some unhealthy eating habits. That's, you know, that's not the sole reason for weight gain oftentimes, but sometimes it's one element of it. And for me, it definitely was. Some of my unhealthy eating habits that I had just gotten into the habit, of eating. So this is really a good time to focus on, continuing to eat, whole foods with as little processing as possible, because you've kind of already started making that a habit in phase 2. If you notice, all the foods that you were eating in phase 2 were real food, right? That you were preparing yourself for the most part. And it's just a really good habit to get into. To be honest, I've actually been really surprised. I guess it shouldn't be surprising, but I have been surprised at what a difference things like additives and chemicals and just different things like that in food, what a difference it can make in our ability to stabilize and maintain weight. Now, I'm not perfect either. I think we're all gonna eat little things here and there that aren't perfect whole foods. But I think the main idea is just that is the majority of our diet, that whole like 80-20 rule or 90-10 rule, whatever, however you want to think of it. But if you can really take that approach in phase 3, it's going to be helping you have the life skills to know how to eat in the long run. Lastly, before I let you guys go, some of you might be wondering like, well, what foods are considered starches and sugars and what foods aren't, right? You want to know like, what exactly can I eat? It's a pretty vague rule. I've gone into a little bit of detail in some of my other phase 3 articles, so I will link to those, and those will kind of give you a general idea. But if you want something like even more specific, I actually have an HCG workbook that you can find on Amazon. Right now, it's October 2014, and it's not out yet, but if it's January 2014 or beyond, when you're watching this, it should be out on Amazon. I'm not even sure what I'm calling the book yet, but it's a very detailed workbook, and in it has a section on phase 3 where I'm a lot more detailed with actual foods, and I have basically 3 lists that are in that workbook. There's a basic, generally recognized as safe list of phase 3 foods. So those are foods that just about everyone can have on phase 3 with no issue. So there's a list of detailed foods on that. Then I have a list of maybe phase 3 foods. And those are foods that some people do fine with on phase 3 and some people don't. So it's just kind of to show you guys like, okay, here's a maybe list that you may or may not choose to try some foods on, but just beware that some people, have more gains or more weight fluctuations with some of those foods. So there's the maybe list. And then there's the third list, which is not safe phase 3 foods. So I have a fairly detailed list of phase 3 foods that are not safe. So, sometimes there's questions about, are beans a starch, and which they are, just different things like that. Sometimes we're not sure, about the carb content in different foods. So those lists, which are in my little HCG workbook, I shouldn't really call it little, it's actually a pretty comprehensive workbook. Again, you can find it on Amazon.com. And the author is Razel Lamy. But anyway, it's very, very useful, I think, if you just want to have more details. So you can check that out if you like. Or if you want to stick with the free route, like I said, I have those articles on my site that do give some basic ideas of what food groups would be considered, starches and different things like that to help get you started. Okay? All right, you guys, take care. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram as HCG Chica. I'm on there fairly frequently, posting just different motivational things to help you guys stick on this diet, not just during phase 2, but during phase 3 and beyond as well. All right, take care. Bye.